I'm staying to keep the family together. We hear this from protective parents regularly, but we need you to understand something that changes everything. In a domestic violence home, the glue holding everyone together isn't love, it's shared trauma. So we want to unpack that in a non-judgmental way today, so you can have more clarity about what might be happening in your family.
If you ever felt like you're addicted to a relationship that hurts you, you aren't crazy, you're trauma bonded. And today we're going to explain exactly how a person's brain can be hijacked by a biological survival mechanism. And just stay with us through that. We have some amazing and really challenging statistics at the end as we talk about the impact that this has on children and what happens to them.
So first off, what is trauma bonding? So in our last video, we talked about trauma bonding in a couple, and this show is specific to family dynamics. So let's start with a clear definition, because this term gets thrown around a lot.
It does, yeah.
Yeah. So trauma bonding is a strong, unhealthy emotional attachment formed between an abused person and their abuser. And it happens through cycles of abuse, interspersed though with affection, with kindness, of reconciliation. And this creates this psychological dependency that mimics love, but it actually stems from survival instincts. So we need to be really clear here. This is not a character flaw in victims.
No, we're not victim blaming and don't be doing that in any way.
No, this is neurobiology. This is what's happening in the brain.
Exactly, yeah. And unlike healthy relationships that are built on consistent trust and respect, trauma bond relationships rely on fear and relief and cycling through that. So during the honeymoon phase, your brain releases bonding hormones like oxytocin because everything's great. There's warm moments that happen. But the thing is that in this context, that reinforces your loyalty despite the harm that you're experiencing at other times. And this extends beyond just partners in a relationship. So when you're thinking about this in a family context, in family systems, the power imbalance between a parent and a child also creates fertile ground for that dysfunctional attachment, terror followed by tenderness. And this, again, is what really begins to build this trauma bond.
Yeah. And for partners, this works through a mechanism called intermittent reinforcement. So it's literally the same psychological mechanism that makes slot machines addictive.
Yeah.
Because if you won every time you pulled the lever, it would get boring. But if you never won, you would quit. But if you win sometimes, unpredictably, you become obsessed.
Yeah.
And that's where the addictive part of the slot machine comes in. So abusers use this positive reinforcement, this affection, praise, gifts. They use it intermittently to manipulate control.
Right. And that's why it goes back and forth. When an abusive partner alternates between cruelty and tenderness, your brain experiences dopamine surges during the good times that feel way more intense, actually, than steady, healthy affection. So the highs can be very high. And that's going into your neurobiology, right? And then eventually you might find yourself chasing those positive feelings or just longing for the next one, convinced that the real relationship is there, and that it's that tender one, and that this abuse is just an aberration or an exception, and it becomes easy to minimize that. And this can create in the brain what we call euphoric recall, where you remember those intense feelings, those highs that are part of that honeymoon phase, while your brain then minimizes the reality of the abuse because that's so horrible and so hard for you to dwell on. And it does this to help you cope with this reality that you're in that seems so hard to break out of.
So we said we were going to talk about family here.
Yeah.
So what does this look like for children?
Yeah.
Children have a biological imperative to attach to their caregivers. It's not optional, it's survival. If the child does not attach to their caregiver, will they survive? They're so dependent on them for everything.
And we sometimes miss that as adults because we have choices.
Yeah.
And we can think about leaving or staying.
Yeah.
And that kind of stuff. But a child doesn't have, can't perceive to have that option.
Yeah. And then when the person responsible for the child's survival is also the source of terror, the child's brain faces an impossible equation. And then the solution is often to create a shared reality with the abuser. And this often includes guilt. They take the abuser's version of events Daddy hit me because I was too loud.
Mm-hmm.
And then this self-blame actually feels safer than accepting that their caregiver is dangerous and unpredictable.
Yeah.
Because if you're dangerous and unpredictable, my survival's at risk.
Right.
Whereas if
terrifying.
it's my fault, then I can maybe make a change so that you won't
Yeah.
do this. You
Yeah.
won't be unpredictable. You won't be dangerous.
Yeah. And this is something that we see pretty much universally with children, is that children in these situations, I mean, they often show up in our office as adults, but they learn to blame themselves for what went wrong with their parent. Even if, as an adult, they can look back and name it as abuse, there's a deeply internalized sense of shame, or it was my fault, or I was not a good kid.
Yeah.
And that kind of.
Yeah. Or everything's my fault.
Yeah.
In whatever's happening now.
Yes.
Yeah. That internalized belief. Mm-hmm.
And that's because when this pattern is like consistent in the family and it keeps, it's intermittent, but it's consistently intermittent, if that's a thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? The reinforcement is occurring, let's put it that way. That leads to developing what we call a fawning response. So you probably heard of fight, flight, freeze as common reactions to traumatic situations. And they are, but there's a fourth one at least to that called fawn. And that's also a trauma response. So fawning involves people-pleasing and hyper-attentiveness to the abuser's mood, so really paying attention to others and suppressing your own needs to avoid triggering violence. So these children become experts at reading the room, and they become the easy child who never causes problems. They're often protecting the abusive parent even more vigorously than they protect themselves at times too, like defending them elsewhere and that kind of thing. And so there's the huge kind of conflict created in the child's brain. And this fawning response extends into adulthood, where you see folks who are very busy sort of caretaking everybody else, but they're also highly attuned to other people's emotions and expressions and stuff like this. And that's because their little nervous systems learn to pick up on all the micro expressions to alert them of danger, to try to placate, to please, to calm, or do whatever they could do. And so that little nervous system has just done so much to adapt, to try to make themselves safe, but it's too much of a burden for that young nervous system, that little child, to carry. And so it does result in these difficult characteristics, this fawning response that extends right into adulthood.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
When we were talking about this earlier, you talked about something you heard at school.
Oh, yeah. So I was sitting in a room of therapists at a training once. So this was after this postgraduate training that I was taking. And it was one of the hardest things I've ever heard in my career. They started talking about, because I don't work with children, I don't see this, but they started talking about like that one kid who shows up at school or shows up at church, and it's like the little girl, and she has the sweetest smile, and she is like the kindest kid to everybody and thoughtful towards other people. And when you know that child has come out of a home where there's domestic violence, they said inevitably, like, that is the child, that's the actual picture of the child who is most at risk for being murdered by a parent. That's the profile right there, is that super, like the sweet, amazing smile, and just such a tragic, because that self-presentation is a reflection of the adaptation to survive in a horrible environment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you look at them and you think they're doing well, even amidst a terrible situation.
Yeah, it's amazing, and people are impressed and whatever, but I mean, that's a very
That's scary.
at-risk child.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it really touches the heart pretty hard.
Yeah. Yeah. So moving back kind of to the trauma bonding
bonding,
and how it affects families. We also need to validate that this takes a physical toll. So trauma bonding doesn't just affect your emotions. Your nervous system is on high alert 24/7. And survivors of this often experience chronic fatigue or headaches or nausea, changes in appetite, sleep deprivation or sleep disruption. Like your body's signaling that you are not safe.
You're not safe. Yeah.
Yeah. And we had a woman one time tell us, like, after I left my abuser, it was like 6 months later, I realized I'm not sick all the time.
I'm not sick all the time. Yeah, powerful.
Yeah. And when you're in it, you don't realize it. Like, it's just what's happening.
So there's just so much cortisol in your body, though, that your body's trying to, again, adapt and survive, and it has to suppress other things like immune systems, whatever, to try to get through it.
Yeah.
Now, this whole trauma bonding thing often starts with love bombing, and that's the intense, overwhelming affection at the start of a relationship. Maybe grand gestures, constant compliments, like you have never felt like so amazing to another person before in your life. Promises of like an amazing or a perfect future. And this floods the brain with reward chemicals. So that kind of sets the hook before the abuse begins. So that when the violence starts, you stay because you're waiting for that love bombing version of this person to return, because nobody's ever made you feel that good before. So this is how it's so easy to get drawn in by the deliberate baiting and the malicious, even though it appears good, it's a malicious intent on the part of the abuser. And that hope and that longing to stay with that is natural, of course. But it gets towards like a stage now where you're in it and it's like, well, what do I do with my kids? How do I protect them? What do I do? Am I enabling the violence? So let's kind of pivot into that a little bit.
Yeah. So yeah, there's a critical distinction between protecting your children and enabling this abuse cycle. And many protective parents struggle with this. And when I say protective parents, I'm not saying that in a judgmental way. It's just parents who want to protect their kids.
And if you're listening to this video, this is, we don't care, right?
So it's more like the caring, right? Caring parents struggle with this. And they stay for the kids thinking they're keeping the peace, or that keeping the family together is better for the kids, even if the mother has to endure violence.
Yeah.
And we're going to put a graphic on the screen here to show you exactly how this looks different in practice, like how the protecting versus enabling compare. So the first thing here in the protecting column is after an abusive episode. So after an abusive episode happens, a protective response is to create physical separation, like validate the child's experience, document the abuse. Yeah. And this is so important because children need their reality confirmed, not denied.
Yeah.
So when we confirm it and say, like, that was wrong, it doesn't matter how loud you are, you should not be hit, or whatever it might be. They need that confirmed, not denied in the moment.
Yeah, that's how we avoid fusing their reality to the abuser's reality.
Yes.
Keep them grounded, right?
Yes.
Whereas on the flip side of that, an enabling response that maybe gives more opportunity, definitely gives more opportunity for the abuse to continue, would be to minimize what happened. Oh, that'll heal. It's, he didn't mean to do that. We need to forgive daddy. He just struggles sometimes. So like very sincere attempts to try to calm maybe the emotion of or the intensity of the moment, to try to return to normal as quickly as possible, or even doing it because you're afraid that if the child doesn't settle, there's going to be more violence. So
yeah,
I think there's a lot of sincere reasons why the enabling happens, but it's still enabling. And
what do you mean by enabling? Like it allows it to go on, allows it to continue?
Well, it's not the victim's duty to stop the violence, because that is outside of their control.
Yeah.
But when our response is still in that fawning or that kind of thing, and we try to placate to appease, it enables the cycle to continue.
Okay.
Right? Whereas protection, which is the harder truths to face, will get in the way of the cycle continuing, the abuse cycle continuing, because it means you're facing the reality and you have to leave. So again, just want to sort of stay in this space very gently and delicately without going into victim blaming. But there are things that enable this, that enable the development of that trauma fawning response and the child beginning to normalize abuse in primary relationships.
Right.
So yeah, we just want to give you sort of the difficult truths here of how to step out of this.
Yeah. And we talk about it being biology, right? So it makes sense why their bodies are responding this way, why the fawn response is coming out. And by doing something different, it interrupts the cycle.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And so just to kind of wrap up that point about minimizing and enabling in that way, like when we have apologies without change behavior, that's just part of the abuse cycle. We don't want to normalize that for the child, to learn that people can harm you, apologize, and you're supposed to be okay with it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And not change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So give us another protective response, Verlynda.
Yeah. So when a child defends the abuser, because that's what they often do, they take the blame themselves, they defend their abuser. So a protective response here would be to gently acknowledge the child's love while naming the behavior as harmful.
Yeah.
So
Holding the two truths.
yeah, like, yes, you love your mom and what she did was wrong.
Yep. Yeah.
So those two things you can hold those both at the same time, right? Truth building builds trust in general, builds trust in themselves, that they can trust themselves.
Yeah.
And it also builds reality testing.
Yeah.
So when something happens, I can trust myself that I know reality and I don't have to just go with the abuser's truth, so to speak. Yeah. So what would be an enabling response?
And even so a less helpful response would be to agree with the child's defense of the parent or the defense of what was done wrong to avoid conflict, or even to blame yourself. Again, that teaches the child to suppress their own survival signals and to move more into the reality of the abuser and less into and out of the actual reality of what was happening.
Right. And you can't trust self. You have to trust the abuser. Yeah.
That you deserve this or there is something wrong with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough. So another protective response, like when considering leaving, develop a safety plan with professionals and prioritize the children's long-term well-being.
Yeah.
So this is so important because research shows that children in homes where the protective parent leaves have significantly better mental health outcomes than those where the family stays together despite violence.
Yeah.
And that's tough. Nobody wants to tear apart a family.
No.
But I think we need to remember here, it's not the leaving that's tearing apart the family.
Yeah.
It's the violence that's happening in the home.
That's
tearing it apart.
Yeah. The healthy response to that sort of tearing is to step away from it. To move from it. Yeah.
I'm going to protect my kids. I'm making a choice.
More important to do that.
And then in the long run, they actually have better mental health outcomes.
Yes. And I think that's where there's so much dilemma, especially when there's societal pressures for families to stay together, maybe religious or faith-based pressures for families to stay together. That loyalty is valid where the relationships are caring and where the attachment to each other is based on respect and safety. But where the relationship is based on a trauma bond, it becomes more important to break the family unit for the safety of the children than to be loyal to the person who is tearing the family up with their violence.
Yeah.
So just to kind of put that in a little bit of a context here.
Yeah. So
heavy chart.
Yeah, that chart's so heavy. But it's the key to breaking the generational cycle. Without intervention, children of domestic violence are 3 times more likely to experience partner violence as adults.
Yeah. Yeah, that was the stat we referred to as the start, and that's a heavy one.
Yeah, yeah. And then you get people in the counseling room what's wrong with me?
Yeah.
Because my parents were violent. Now this person's violent. Something must be wrong with me. They've internalized that messaging that they got from the abuser. It's tough.
It's very tough.
Yeah. And then they often either become perpetrators, having modeled the behavior.
Yeah.
I repeat the same thing with my children, or victims. But they're seeking the familiar chaos that feels like love.
Yeah.
They've learned that's what love feels like,
That's
or they
their normal.
think they think that's what love actually feels like.
Yes. Yeah, and of course, breaking free requires a conscious safety plan, and this is not a video about safety plans, so what I'm going to talk to you about here is just super rudimentary, but know that there are great resources available for you to really help you dive into the safety side of this. But the first thing is to recognize that healthy relationships feature consistent safety, not a cycle of fear and relief. That is such an important distinction. The second thing is to understand your role from your own prior experiences, maybe with violence against you. Were you in maybe your family of origin or previous relationships, were you the fawner, the one who fawned? Were you the scapegoat who got blamed for everything? And those were survival adaptations that under those moments of intense pressure you came up with, and they're ingenious. They're not character flaws that are baked into who you are. So self-compassion is in order with that, but grappling with this and wading through those difficult emotions that surround these admissions, these acknowledgments of how you were drawn in and what was done to you, those help you to establish clear ideas of who you really are and now of your worth and who you want to be. So those valuable parts, they're difficult to face, and it takes time. It takes a safe emotional environment to figure these things out, which kind of leads us to the third part, and that is you need a safety plan here. You can't process trauma while you're still living in it. You have to be outside of the trauma to really process it through well. That's also a difficult reality. At the end of the day, no amount of changing that you can do that will stop the violence against you, because you're not the perpetrator. It's not within your control. So that's why in violent situations, when the person is ready with their time and their own autonomy, we want to support them as much as possible in leaving in a way that is safe for them to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And leaving a trauma-bonded relationship is one of the hardest things a human being can do. Like, it feels like breaking an addiction, because chemically it is one, right? But staying was not weakness, it was survival. Yeah. And choosing something different now is not betrayal. Like, it's your first step towards safety.
Yeah. Again, like the trauma, like, you also can't heal a family system while you're still fighting for survival within it. If you recognized yourself or you and your kids in this video, please reach out if we can help you. We do specialize in family trauma. We've helped others leave violent relationships. We help survivors develop a solid set of tools to see if it's safe to go back ever, if that's possible. Some violent abusers do change. Many, I would say probably most, do not. And that's hard to grapple with, to figure out. But we can walk with you through that without making assumptions. And so if you would like, you can go to therapivo.com, book a free 20-minute consultation with one of our team members. We'll help you build that safety plan and then help you make the choices that are best for you and your family, your kids, to go forward from there.